Star forts. Hundreds of these beautiful buildings and earthworks adorn our planet like jewelry. Mainstream historians assure us that this peculiar shape evolved to cover dead zones for shooters supposedly defending their fort. They are telling us the story that first the towers were around, but the shooters had dead zones, and when they wanted to shoot at the enemy there, they would be exposed, but when they made those towers pointed, those dead zones were eliminated. There is no doubt that indeed battles were fought in these forts. But that doesn't mean that the star design itself evolved exactly for military purposes only. It doesn't mean that it evolved for military purposes mainly as well. It is possible, and as we're gonna see even probable, that these buildings had different purpose originally. After all, most of them were built, maybe on older bases, but built in the era when gunpowder was available, and usually when you siege a fort, large cannons would be used, and they would tear the walls of the forts regardless in which angle they faced them. That is how battles were fought at that time, with large cannons that would demolish your fort no matter at what angles are the towers and are they pointed or not. Historians also try to assure us that the star forts were first invented in Italy in the 15th century. Well, strange. One would think that historians would like to read books and base their claims on uh, books and facts, but it is not so, because there is a mention in the Russian old references that a certain fort was built on the remains of an existing structure. In reality, we know amazingly little about the true history of the star forts. Indeed, I was even doubting should I make this episode or not, because I will just place many more questions and give very few answers. It seems some of the earthworks that I call old earth ruins do have some strange pointed elements again that we don't understand what's their purpose, and maybe those elements have the same purpose in Starford. Now some of those earthworks are absolutely gigantic. Look at this one, it just dominates the landscape. The road looks dwarfish next to it. This one is from America. Now this one in Russian it's called Velikaya Zavolskaya Stena and is some 2,500 kilometers long. Even the official history says we don't know who and when built this, because they find over there artifacts dating from all years, including the most primitive ones. And on the top of that, in some textbooks, they still write it was it was built by this or that Russian ruler, and there is even a document. There was so many workers doing it. But what they don't mention about this document, which is not a secret, anybody can read it, is that it is clearly said that these workers were repairing the old structure. They were not creating it. And anyway, it is utterly impossible for just a handful of people to dig this thing manually 2,500 kilometers. And then they say, oh, then the primitive Slavic people could have built it. How can primitive people that, according to those very same textbooks, did not even have any organization in terms of a country and were supposedly that dumb, how could they organize themselves and make such a large cross-country project? And a very recent finding of Mr. Subotin, just a few months old, they went to the site in the area of Arkaim and found out that it is not only earthwork, it's got a shell of geopolymer. Maybe it is partial, I don't know even at what depth it can be found, but it is definitely not a stone because it follows this snake-like earthwork wherever it goes. And these are not the stones put next to each other, it's a solid shell covering the structure. And this photograph I also found, it is supposedly again from a site of such a earthwork, long one. There was no information at which location exactly is the photo taken, but it resembles so much the picture you see at the Bosnian pyramid, where, by the way, when we hear the latest news, they tested the hardness of the geopolymer there, and it is more than the most advanced high-tech cements we are starting to develop nowadays. This is a mini star fort, maybe connected to one of these long structures. And this is how the simple variations of the star forts appear on the old maps. I don't think this has to do, this can make any difference in any sort of defense or shooting. It would make much more sense if it is connected to some sort of sacred geometry or to some technological energy work, for example, because if you remember the episode about the Viborg Bay megaliths near St. Petersburg, there was one place where the compass was going crazy. Well, exactly at that place, that pointed corner of the building was sticking out. Unfortunately, whatever was there is in such a poor shape that we cannot even understand was it a star fort originally or what. But even in the current preserved star forts, some people have been measuring. That is one of the articles that disappeared during the numerous reinstallations of a brand new computer that I had to do while desperately trying to make this Survivor series. And I mean complete reinstallations of the operating system without being allowed to transfer my old data. So I'm not sure what exactly instruments were they using. Was it just a compass? But I think something else. And definitely they were detecting some sort of energy changes at the pointed rays of a star fort. And currently, the hypothesis most sincere researchers tend to stick to is that actually these were power stations, or at least many of them, maybe not all. All these cities built in identical style, now misleadingly called neoclassical, they all have very similar designs, so we'll see more on this in next episode, but this could have been their power station. Now this is an old map of Sydney, and on the very corner we see a battery. Well, I don't know. Why would they build such a small fort at such a location? Well, they must have been defending themselves from the onslaughts of the armies of goblins coming to attack Sydney from Antarctica. I don't know what else to suggest based on the location and the historic period that it was supposedly built in. And here, the rays of the small star fort that is on the boundary of the bigger one, the rays are pointing inwards. The question is, where are the enemies? Looking at the layouts of many star forts, one starts seriously doubting their defense purpose. In this case, where are the enemies? You leave your defense circle completely opened at one point, and on the other side you put a few rows of these pointed angles. Here the same, the pointers are towards the center of the next fort. Where are the enemies? Or in cases like this is absolutely useless for any defense. Maybe some of you would object that they would put pointed angles only towards the direction from where the enemies would be expected to show up from. But it doesn't work like this as well. For example, Belgium and Netherlands are full of such star forts, and in many cases just One of the sides is barbed with these sharp angles, the rest is completely exposed, and very often these pointed angles point towards the inside of the country and not um, to the direction from where supposedly the enemies were coming. Or look at this layout, it's some sort of jewelry decoration, or I don't know what, but I mean, this hanging pendulous, I really don't see how they would have helped you fighting your enemy. Or those isolated angles that are not even connected to the fort. What you send there, your shooters that you don't want to see alive again? They're basically even outside the fort, exposed to the enemies from the side. Here, the angles are not only isolated, disconnected from the fort, but also in the water. Do you really want to send your shooters there during the time of siege? That is a death sentence as such. If you want to, have your people killed, then why even build the fort to start with? And not only building it, but decorating it as a lace of a dress of a lady, a fine lady. Just look at the intricate designs of star forts. This is amazing. The endeavor and expense that such lace forts would require is just unimaginable. Look at the scale. This is really not easy to build. They must have heads. They must have been knowing what are they doing. And I sincerely doubt it was all for defense purposes. Look at this. You build half a fort and you leave one side completely exposed to welcome the enemies. And the forts of a design like this are so many. The barbed elements are pointing towards inside the land, or here it is split in two. What is the point of making such intricate defense arrangements on one side and then leave the other side completely exposed? If an enemy has traveled hundreds or thousands of kilometers from abroad to come and attack you, what would stop them to walk a few hundred meters more and attack you from the side that doesn't have these pointed angles? This is stupid. And here they're trying to convince us that, you see, it was all for military purposes, for shooting. Shooting, and where is the gun top aiming? At your own fort. The other pointed angle of your own fort. Or maybe you just sit all day and wait somebody to stand exactly there in the water where you can shoot at him. And when that unlucky chap finally gets there, you have to tell him to wait to prepare your top gun because he has to pose, It takes some time to load and shoot with this top gun. And absolutely identical star forts are all over the world. They are these ones in South Africa, in Suriname. We're being assured that people just made copy and paste easily like this all over the world. Well, they must have had need to defend themselves from the heavy artillery of the Bushmans, famous for their huge guns, or maybe not. I think it was again the goblins from Antarctica. All this story about the defense function not very much confirmed by the old illustrations. You see the actual really walls defending this city. They they are built on the top of the around the star fort. The actual people are not in the fort. Indeed, in too many cases, these forts are just so small that there is nothing, even you can't put anything inside to defend anyway. Japan has got its own star forts, and they are really exactly like those you find all over the world. And they are not isolated cases of survivor style architecture over there. They go along with the full quarters of buildings in such ancient Romaic style. The full official history of the appearance of those quarters is quite weird and not very logical because Japan was isolated for such a long period from the rest of the world, practically. And in the episode about Japan, you can find more details why they all appear quite out of place in Japan if the official history really happened. But if the star forts had a function different from defense, what would that be? Why, instead of top guns, on the old images we see strange objects sticking out and a beautiful garden landscaping? And why always these round metal balls in central position, resembling high-tech devices for atmospheric electricity or something of that sort? And what about the strange garden decoration? It turns out those could be chimneys. Has this old image caught them functioning with the smoke coming out from the top? Or maybe the ball on the top is producing the smoke or these energy waves in some other fashion. We can't make any conclusions for now, but some of these strange sticking objects have survived indeed. They're just not the imagination of the medieval artist. This is how they look in reality. And all these balls, they always tend to stand on prominent places. Are they really only decoration elements? On some old maps, we also see some sort of things sticking out from the star forts. Now, this is a Christian cross, no doubt. But then others have, Orthodox Christian crosses, which shouldn't be there in Western Europe, and even the Trishuls of Shiva. Or maybe it is some other sort of device. And always, maybe these round things are the balls from the paintings. Maybe they were the most important feature of these star forts. Now, apparently, at this stage, we're just at the very dawn of trying to find out what are the star forts all about. Fortunately, Alexander Dubrovsky has started an on-field research, finally. A lot of the information in this episode is based on his research, and the collection of Starford images and maps is from Mikhail Volk. So what Alexander did is he took all the maps of Starfords and went to that place to see what's happening there nowadays. This is what is regularly happening to star forts. I'm sure that the penguins in black suits will assure me that a meteorite or something has fallen at that location with a radius over 1 kilometer, and this must have happened in recent times. And surprisingly enough, nothing like this has been recording. And surprisingly enough, these meteorites are so intelligent to the point that they have hobbies of their own, and one of those hobbies is to fall on sites that are in survivor style architecture. What Alexander found during his on-field research is a systematic ongoing attempt to destroy and demolish star forts. But not all of them, only those who maybe have still some equipment left that would maybe help people to guess their actual original purpose. Maybe you remember this example from previous episodes. This is what Dnepropetrovsk used to be with its own star fort. This is how it looks nowadays, and this has happened very recently because that map is not at all old. And of course there is no mention anywhere of a meteorite or anything else falling there. Then what about this huge crater? These are the two images overlapping, proving that the map of Dnepropetrovsk doesn't reflect some other, the old map doesn't reflect some other spot in the city, but exactly this one. Another similar example is the Kodak star fort. This is what it used to be. And then some years after we see a completely different image. By chance, the earth starts, disintegrating exactly there. And this is how this disintegration has progressed till nowadays. Only two of the pointed angles exist in the form of slight hints. This is at the exact very same location. Well, at least here we know what happened. They decided to make a stone quarry for granite exactly at that location, just a few short meters from the river. And it didn't cross the head of any of those engineers that the water will just flood the quarry that is underground. Well, they dug some 40 meters deep to the water level and 40 meters even below water level, and after that they abandoned the quarry due to flooding. There is plenty of granite all over the place. Why didn't they make a quarry at a proper location, not one that is in danger of flooding? Were they really quarrying stone or just extracting old equipment? City of Samara. Life is full of strange coincidences, isn't it? They made a granite quarry exactly at the very spot in the center of the star fort that existed here in the past. Once they reached the very same depth of 80 meters, they again lost interest in quarrying any further granite and closed down the quarry. In the area of the city of Krivorok, absolutely same story. There was once upon a time a star fort, and they open a quarry right on the top of it. They dig this time 42 meters, and then it gets flooded and closed down. Fort Ingul, absolutely same story. They decided to open, what is it, a quarry or a mine exactly on this location. The village of Chertanuik, a quarry or a mine again established exactly on the location of already demolished Star Fort. The village of Mishulin Rock. The Star Fort was probably completely fallen apart when they started again mining exactly on the same spot. Were they looking for the equipment inside? Well, Alexander has been searching for places that are not cleaned up yet. Maybe Nikitinskaya Fort is one of them. According to the history that we know, it is built in year 1774. Nowadays, only the earthworks are left in the fields. This is how the fort looks right now. Well, there are pipes for earth gas coming from the fort. Of course, the yellow equipment you see is modern, but the interesting thing is where does the gas come from? The green arrow points towards the earthworks remaining from the fort, and the pipes do come from over there, according to Alexander Dubrovsky, who visited the place. So how come gas pipes come from underneath the old structure in case they are recent as well? And this is not in Holland, where they do make endeavors to preserve and even sometimes renovate such old earthworks. This is somewhere in Russia, in Ukraine, where such endeavors simply don't happen. I mean, this is really an abandoned earthwork in the fields. Well, it seems that the star forts, or at least many of them, could have been some sort of power stations. Maybe some of them were somehow connected with extracting earth gas. Alexander found few other really abandoned star fort earthworks with the gas pipe sticking out in the center of them. Now this looks quite modern, but who knows what it is connected with below, from below. Now in recent times, in US, we saw on TV that the gas company Chevron had one of their equipment stations for extracting gas. It caught fire. An incident occurred. Now, on the TV footage from this fire, do you see the quadrat formations, earth formations? Well, they are there. They are a part of this technological setup that they have for extracting gas, but very similar, actually identical formations are seen on the star forts. Star forts seem to be very intimately connected with water. They love water. They as if need to have some river or sea next to them. Very often they are seen on the very tips of peninsulas, and their pointed formations seem to always point towards the land. An almost none or very small one would point towards the water. That by itself questions the defense purpose of such fortresses. If it was an isolated case, then we would say, okay, these people were not expecting enemies from the water. That is why they fashioned the layout of their fortress like that. But it is not so, because this is a common worldwide pattern regardless of the position of the so-called fantasy enemies. Of course, in some cases there would be natural cliffs on the ends of such a peninsula, but again, these are very isolated cases and definitely cannot account for this worldwide standard layout. Well, actually, a modern method technology for extracting earth gas involves large quantities of water. It is needed all the time to extract earth gas. Well, maybe they were using the same technology in the star forts. Who knows? At this point, this is only a hypothesis again. It is too early to take it as an established, confirmed theory. But it is an option. Maybe those so-called neoclassical cities all over the world with buildings and structures that we cannot replicate nowadays, and that, by the way, fall apart and deteriorate much slower than our buildings. When we repair them, then our repairs fall apart faster than the original parts of the building that stay for we don't know how many hundreds of years. So maybe these nice cities, the cities of the last wave of the survivor culture, maybe that's how they were powered by these star forts. And here is a star fort buried under the thick earth layers. These are mountains on the top of it. It shouldn't be that way if the official fairy tales that they are telling us about the star forts are true. An event of the magnitude of what we tend to call the Great Flood could have caused such a gigantic shift of land masses. There is nothing like this in the story of this area. Officially, these are thick earth layers, very, very old, and yet they are telling us that star forts were invented in Italy just a couple of centuries ago. Well, again and again, their own stories don't match with each other. Some star forts still have tunnels underneath them. The stonework is, of course, much better preserved over there than on the surface, where it doesn't even exist in many cases anymore. I was not able to find any sort of map or list of all the star forts worldwide. The list offered by Wikipedia is very much incomplete. And in our age of high-tech, web design technologies, nobody has bothered to make a worldwide map of them. Or maybe such a map would make the mainstream historians somewhat uncomfortable, because people may start asking how could people build such forts that as if came from the design of a single engineer. They are so much similar all over the world. even in the smallest details. For example, the small watch towers at the tip of this pointed rays of the star. This is another collection of star forts found on a website. Again, it is very much incomplete. And again, I observe the same pattern as with the so-called Roman aqueducts, for example, or the Roman amphitheaters. Tons of so-called scientific research, and always so theoretical and assuring us about things that we always somehow cannot verify. But when it comes to a comprehensive list or a map of the actual archaeological sites and proper documentation and information about them, scarce, unorganized, or utterly missing. All I can say is that it is easy to click, copy and paste and in this way manufacture endless thick volumes of so-called scientific work, but it is not that easy to click, copy and paste entire gigantic fortresses, many of them by the way seriously megalithic. Now let's see some star forts from around the world. Uzbekistan 3, Uruguay, Afghanistan, South Africa 2, Brazil 6, Austria 5, Slovenia 1, Turkey 11. The rest of this episode will be just a review of a collection of some of the star forts from all around the world. So many have disappeared, but yet many are still here for us. Norway 6, Armenia 1, Mauritius 4, Africa 9, Latin America 27, Canada 16, USA 48, Asia 7. Indonesia, that was Japan. Macau, Manila, that's in the Philippines. Taiwan, Bahrain, Vietnam, again Indonesia. Spain 25. Kazakhstan, 10 of them. Romania, 12. In Bucharest, they have only 6 in one city. Slovakia 3. India 10. I really doubt this number is correct, because so many ports in India have similar shape. Probably there are much more than 10. Sri Lanka 7. Хорватия Dubrovnik 6. Denmark 10. Portugal 57. Malta 7. Great Britain 22. Hungary 5, Greece 9, Ireland 3, Finland 9, Czech Republic 7, Serbia 3, Cyprus 6, Sweden 10, Germany 31, Baltic region 13, this one is from Latvia, again, Litva, Estonia, Litva, Poland 15, France 119, in Paris alone 13 star forts preserved till nowadays at least. That's a lot. Netherlands, that means Holland. 90 of them. That's a lot for a not very big country. Italy, 62. Belgium, 32. Ukraine, 45. Belarus, 8. Russia, 127. And these are again from all over the world. have been receiving messages from people who have a problem finding all the episodes of the Survivors documentary. If you go to the playlist section of my YouTube channel, there is this playlist, and over here you can find all the episodes and some useful notes